Chapter 19. The Lion and the Serpent. Harry felt as though he were carrying some kind of talisman inside his chest over the following 2 weeks. A glowing secret that supported him through Umbridge's classes and even made it possible for him to smile gladly as he looked into her horrible bulging eyes. He and D.A. were resisting her under her nose, doing the very thing that she and Ministry most feared. And wherever he was supposed to be reading Wilbur Slickhart's book, during her lesson he dwelled inside on satisfying memories of their most recent meeting, remembering how Neville had unsuccessfully disarmed Hermione. Now Colin Creevey had mastered the impediment jinx after 3 meetings hard effort. How Parvati Patil had proceeded such a good reductor curse, and she had reduced the table carrying all the snake scopes to dust. He was finding it almost impossible to fix a regular night of a week for DA meeting, as they had to accommodate 3 separates, which team practice, which was often rearranged depending on the weather condition. But Harry was not sorry about this. He had a feeling that it was probably better to keep the timing of their meetings unpredictable. If anyone was watching them, it would be hard to make out a pattern. Harmony soon devised a very clever method of communicating the time and date on the next meeting on all the members in case they need to change it at short notice, because it would look so suspicious if people from different houses were seen crossing the great hall to talk to each other often. She gave each of the members of DA a fake gallon. Ron became very excited when he saw the basket at first, convinced that she was actually giving out gold. You see the numerals around the edge of the coin, Hermione said, holding one up for examination at the end of their fourth meeting. The coin gleamed fat and yellow in the light from the torch. On the real gallon, that's just a serial number referring to the goblin who passed the coin. On this fake coin, though, the number will change to reflect the time and date of the next meeting. The coins will grow hot when the date change. So if you are carrying them in pocket, you'll be able to fill them. We take one each and when he said the date of the next meeting, he'll change the number on his coin. And because I have put a patron charm on them, they'll all change to mimic his. A blank silence greeted Harmoni's word. She looked around at all the faces and turned to her rather disconcerted. Well, I thought it was a good idea, she said uncertainly. I mean, even if Umbridge asks us to turn out our pocket, there will be nothing fishy about carrying a gallon, is there? But well, if you don't want to use them, you can do a protein charm, said Terry Boot. Yes, said Hermione, but that's an EWT standard. That is, he said weakly. Oh, said Hermione, trying to look modest. Oh well, yes, I suppose it is. How came you are not in Ravenclaws? He demanded, staring at Hermione with something close to wonder. With brain like yours, well, the Sorting Hat did seriously consider putting me in Ravenclaws during my sorting, said Hermione brightly. But it decided on Gryffindor in the end. So does that mean we are using the gallons? There was a murmur of assent, and everybody moved forward to collect one from the basket. Harry looked sideways at Hermione. You know what this reminds me of? No, what said the Death Eater's scars? Voldemort touched one of them, and all the scars burned, and they know they have got to join him. Well, yes, said Hermione quietly. That is where I got the idea. You'll notice I decided to engrave the date on bite of metal rather than on our members' scheme. Yeah, I prefer your way, said Harry, grinning as he slid his gallon into his pocket. I suppose the only danger with this is that we might accidentally spend them. Fat chance, said Ron, who was examining his own fake gallon with a slightly hopeful ear. I haven't got any real gallon to confuse it with. At the first Quidditch match of the season, Gryffindor versus Slytherin drew nearer. Their DM meeting were put on hold because Angelina insisted on most daily practice. The fact that the Quidditch Cup had not been here for long added considerable to the interest and excitement surrounding the forthcoming game. The Ravenclaws and Hufflepuff were taking a live interest in the outcome, for they, of course, will be playing both teams over the coming years. And the head of house of the competing team, though they attempted to discuss it under the decent pretense of sportsmanship, were determined to see their side victory. Harry realized how much Professor McGonagall cared about beating Slytherin when she abstained from giving them homework in the week of leading up to the match. I think you have got enough to do getting on with the movement, she said loftily. Nobody could quite believe their ears until she looked directly at Harry and Ron and said grimly, I have become accustomed to seeing the Quidditch Cup in my study. Boys, but I really don't want to have to hand it over to Professor Snape. So use the extra time to practice, won't you? Snape was no less obviously partisan. He had booked the Quidditch pitch for Slytherin practice so often that the Gryffindors had difficulty getting on it to play. He was also turning a deaf ear to the many reports of Slytherin attempt to hex Gryffindor prayer in the corridor. When Alicia Spinnet turned up in the hospital wing with her eyebrow growing so thick and fast and they obscured her vision and obstructed her mouth, Snape insisted that she must have attempted a ear-thickening charm on herself and refused to listen to the 14 eyewitnesses who insisted that they had been the Slytherin's creeper. Miles Bletchley hid her from behind with a jinx while she worked in the library. Harry felt optimistic about Gryffindor's chances. They had, after all, never lost to Malfoy's team. Admittedly, Ron was still not performing towards standard, but he was working extremely hard to improve. His greatest weakness was a tendency to lose confidence when he made a blunder. If he let in one goal, he became flustered and was therefore likely to miss more. On the other hand, Harry had seen Ron make some true spectacular saves when he was on form during one memorable practice. He had hung one-handed from his broom and kicked the Puffle so hard away from the goal loop that it saw the length of the pitch and thought the center hoop at the other end. The rest of the team felt this save compared favorable with one made recently by Barry Ryan, the Irish international keeper, against Poland top chaser Laszlo Zomiski. Even Fred had said that Ron might yet make him the George proud, and that they were seriously considering admitting that he was related to them, something he assured Ron they had been trying to deny for 4 years. The only thing really worrying Harry was how much Ron was allowing the tactic of Slytherin team to upset him before they even got onto the pitch. Harry, of course, had endured their snide comment for more than 4 years, so whispered of, Hey Potty, I heard Warrington's want to knock you off your room on Saturday. Far from chilling his blood, made him laugh. Warrington seemed so pathetic. I had been more worried if he was aiming for the person next to me. He retorted which made Ron and Hermione laugh to wipe the smirk off Pansy Parkinson's face. But Ron had never endured a relentless campaign of insult, cheer, and intimidation when Slytherin, some of them seventh year and considerable largely than he was uttered as they passed in the corridor. Got you a bed, booked in the hospital wing Weasley. He did not laugh but turned a delicate shade of green. When Draco Malfoy imitated Ron dropping the quaffle, which he did whenever they were within sight of each other. Ron's ear glowed red and his hand shook so badly that he was likely to drop whatever he was holding at the time too. October extinguished itself in a rush of falling wind and driving rain, and November arrived, cold as frozen iron, with hard frost every morning, an icy draft that bite at exposed hand and faces. The skies and the ceiling of the great hall turned a pale pearly grey. Mountains around Hogwarts became snow-capped, and the temperature in the castle dropped so far that many students wore their thick protective dragon skin glow in the corridor between lessons. The morning of the match dawned bright and cold. When Harry awoke, he looked around at Ron's bed and saw him sitting bolt upright, his arm around his knees, staring fixedly into space. "You all right?" said Harry. Ron nodded but did not speak. Harry was reminded forcibly of the time that Ron had accidentally put a slug vomiting charge on himself. He looked just as pale and sweaty as he had done then, not to mention as reluctant to open his mouth. "You just need some breakfast," Harry said bracingly. "Come on." The great hall was filling up fast when they arrived. The talk louder and moved more exasperated than usual. As they passed the Slytherin table, there was an upsurge of noise. Harry looked around and saw that nearly everyone there was wearing, in addition to the usual green and silver scarf, and had silver badges in the shape of what seemed to be crowns. For some reason, many of them waved at Ron, laughing uproariously. Harry tried to see what was writing on the badges as he walked by, but he was too concerned to get Ron past their table quickly to linger long enough to read them. They received a rousing welcome at Gryffindor table, where everyone was wearing red and gold, but far from raising Ron's spirit, the chairs seemed to be sapped the last of his moral. He collapsed into the nearest bench, looking as though he were facing his final meals. "I must have been mental to this," he said in a croaky whisper. "Mental? Don't be thick," said Harry firmly, passing him a choice of cereals. "You're going to be fine. It's normal to nervous. I'm rubbish, Kronk Ron. I'm lousy. I can't play to save my life. What was I thinking?" "Get a grip," said Harry sternly. "Look at that save you made with your food the other day." Even Fred and George said it was brilliant. Ron turned a tortured face to Harry. "That was an accident," he whispered miserably. "I didn't mean to do it. I slipped off my broom when none of you were looking, and I was trying to get back on the I kicked the quaffle by accident." "Well," said Harry, recovering quickly from his unpleasant surprise, "a few more accidents like that and the game is back, isn't it?" Hermione and Ginny sat down opposite them, wearing red and gold scarf, glow and rosette. "How are you feeling?" Gilly asked Ron, who was now staring into the jug of milk at the bottom of his empty cereal bowl, as though seriously considering attempting to drown himself in them. "He's just nervous," said Harry. "Well, that's a good sign. I never feel you perform as well in the exam if you are a bit nervous," said Hermione heartily. "Hello," said a vague and dreamy voice behind them. Harry looked up. Luna Lovegood had drifted over from the Ravenclaw's table. Many people were staring at her and a few openly laughing and pointing. She had managed to procure a hat shaped like a life-size lion head, which was perched precariously on her head. I am supporting Gryffindor, said Luna, pointing unnecessarily at her hat. Look what it does. She reached up at the tap and hat with her wand. It opened the mouth wide and gave an extreme realistic roar that made everyone in the vicinity jump. It's good, isn't it? Said Luna happily. I wanted to have it chewing up a serpent to represent Slytherin, but there wasn't time. Anyway, good luck, Ronald. She drifted away. They had not quite recovered from the shock of Luna's hat before Angelina came hurrying toward them, accompanied by Katy and Alicia, whose eyebrow had mercifully been returned to normal by Madame Pomfrey. When you are ready, she said, we are going to go straight down to the beach, check out conditions, and change. We'll be there in a bit, Harry assured her. Ron just got to have some breakfast. It became clear after 10 minutes, however, that Ron was not capable of eating anything more, and Harry thought it's best to get him down to the changing room. As they rose from the table, Hermione got up on two and, taking Harry's arm, she drew him to the side. Don't let Ron see what's on those Slytherin badges, she whispered urgently. Harry looked questioningly at her. She shook her head warningly. Ron had just ambled over to them, looking lost and desperate. Good luck, Ron, said Hermione, standing on tiptoe and kissing him on his cheek. And you, Harry. Ron seemed to come to himself slightly as they walked back across the great hall. He touched the spot on his face where Hermione had kissed him, looking puzzled, and though he was not quite sure what had just happened, he seemed too distracted to notice much around him. But Harry cast a curious glance at the crown-shaped badge as they passed the Slytherin table, and this time he made out the word etched on them. Weasley is our king, with an unpleasant feeling that this could mean nothing good. He hurried Ron across the entrance hall, down to stone step, and out into the icy air. The frosty grass crunched under their feet as they hurried down the sloping lawns toward the stadium. There was no wind at all, and the sky was uniform pearly white, which meant that visibility could be good without the drawback of direct sunlight in the eyes. Harry pointed out this encouraging factor to Ron as they walked, but he was not sure that Ron was listening. Angelina had changed already and was talking to the rest of team when they entered. Harry and Ron pulled on their robes. Ron attempted to do his back to front for several minutes before Alicia took pity on him and went to help, and then sat down to listen to the pre-match talk while the babbles of voices outside grew steadily louder as the crowd came pouring out of the castle toward the beach. Okay, I have only just found out the final lineup for Slytherin, said Angelina, consulting a piece of parchment. Last year beater, Derek and Bone have left now, but it looked as though Montagues replaced them with the usual Gorlins rather than anyone who can fly particularly well. There are two blocks called Grab and Goyle. I don't know how much about them. They do, said Ron and Harry together. Well, they don't look bright enough to tell one end of the broom from another, said Angelina, poking her parchment. But then I was always surprised onto the beach without signpost. Grab and Goyle are the same mold, Harry assured her. They could hear hundreds of footsteps mounting the bank beaches of the spectators standing now. Some people were singing, though Harry could not make out of the word. He was starting to feel nervous, but he knew his butterflies were as nothing as Ron's. Was clutching his stomach and staring straight ahead again, his jaw set and his complexion pale grey. "It's time," said Angelina in a hushed voice, looking at her watch. "Come on, everyone, good luck." The team rose, shouldered their broom, and marched in a single file out of the changing room and into the dazzling sunlight. A roar of sound greeted them, in which Harry could still hear singing, though it was muffled by the cheers and whistles. The Slytherin team were standing waiting for them. The two Wanting of them, they too were wearing those silver crown-shaped badges. The new captain, Montague, was built along the same line as Dudley, with a massive forearms like hairy hams. Behind him lurked Grab and Goyle, almost as large, blinking stupidly in the sunlight, swinging their new beaters' bats. Malfoy stood to one side, the sunlight gleaming on his white blond hair. He caught Harry's eye and Smrick tapped two crown-shaped badges on his chest. "Captain, shake hands," ordered the umpire. Madame Hooch and Angelina and Montague reached other. Harry could tell that Montague was trying to crush Angelina's finger, though he did not wince. "Mount your broom." Madame Hooch placed her whistle in her mouth and blew. The ball was released and the 14 players shot upward. Out of the corner of his eyes, Harry saw Ron stick off toward the goal hoop. He zoomed higher, dogging a bulger, and set off on a wide lap of pitch, gazing around for a glint of goal. On the other side of the stadium, Draco Malfoy was doing exactly the same. And it's Johnson with the quaffle. What a player that girl is. I have been saying it for years, but she still won't go out with me. Gordon yelled Professor McGonagall. Just a fun fact, Professor had a bit of interest and she ducked Warrington. She passed Montague. She's ouch, been hit from behind by a bludger from Grab. Montague catched the quaffle. Montague heading up the pitch and nice bludger. There from George Weasley, that's a bludger to the head of Montague. He dropped Quaffle, caught by Catty Bale. Catty Bale of the Gryffindor reverse pass to Alicia Spinnet and Spinnet away. Lee Jordan commentary rang through the stadium and Harry listened as hard as he could through the wind whistling in his ears and the dean and the crowd all yelling and booing and singing. Rogers Warrington avoid a bludger, close all. Alicia and the crowd are loving this. Just listen to them, what that they are singing. And as Lee paused to listen, the song rose loud and clear from the sea of green and silver in the slithering action of the stand. Wesley cannot save a thing. He cannot block a single ring. That's why Slytherin all singing Wesley is our king. Wesley was born in a bean. He always lets the quaffle in. Wesley will make sure we win. Wesley is our king. And Alicia passed black to Angelina. He shouted, and Harry swore his inside boiling of what he had just heard. He knew Lee was trying to drown out sound of singing. "Come on now." Angelina looked like she's got just the keeper's bit. She stood. Ha. Blaze the Slytherin keeper had saved the goal. He threw Quaffle to Warrington, who sped onto with it. Zigzagging in between Alicia and Catty, the singing from the blow grew louder and louder as it drew nearer and nearer Ron. "Wesley is our king, Wesley is our king. He always let the quaffle in. Wesley is our king." Harry could not help himself, abandoning his search for the snitch. He turned his firebolt toward Ron, a lone finger at the far end of the pitch, hovering before the three-goal hoop while a massive Warrington peered toward him. And it's Warrington with the quaffle. Warrington head for the goals. His outer bludger rang with just a catty ahead. The great swell of song rose from the Slytherin stand below. Wesley cannot save a thing. not block a single ring. So it's the first test for a new Gryffindor keeper, Weasley brother of Peter, Fred and George, and the promising new talent on the team. Come on, Ron! But the scream of delight came from the Slytherinian. Ron had dived widely, his arm wide, and the quaffle had soared between them, straight to Ron's central lobe. Slytherin's claw came Lee's voice amid the cheering and booming from the crowd below. So that's 10 nail to Slytherin. Bad luck Ron. The Slytherin sang ever louder. Weasley was born in a bean. He always let the quaffle in. And Gryffindor back in position, and it's Kitty Bell taking up the pitch quietly, violently, though the singing was now so defending that he could hard make himself heard above it. Weasley will make sure we will win. Weasley is our king. Harry, what are you doing? Screamed Angelina, soaring, get past him to keep with Catty, get going. Harry realized that he had been stationary in midair for more than a minute, watching the progress of the match without spreading a thought of the whereabouts of the snitch. Terrified, he went into the dive and started circling off the pitch again, staring around, trying to ignore the chorus now thundering through the stadium. Weasley is our king, Weasley is our king. There was no sign of the snitch anywhere. He looked. Malfoy was still circling the stadium just like Harry. They passed midway around the pitch going in opposite direction, and Harry heard Malfoy singing loudly. Weasley was born in Bean, and it's Warrington again, bellowed Lee, who passed a pussy of past Spinnet. Come on now, Angelina, you can take him. Turn out you can't, but nice Bulger and Floyd Weasley. I mean George Weasley. Oh, here's one of them anyway, and Warrington dropped the quaffle and Catty Bell dropped it too. So that's Montague with the quaffle. Slytherin captain Montague take the quaffle and he is off up the pitch. Game now, Gryffindor block him. Harry zoomed around the end of the stadium behind the Slytherin goal, hoofed willing himself not to look at what was going on Ron's end. As he sped past the Slytherin keeper, he heard Bletchley singing along with the crowd below. Weasley's cannot save a thing. But Pussy Dog, Alicia again, and he is standing straight for the goal, stopped Ron. Harry did not have to look to see what had happened. There was a terrible groan from the Gryffindorian, coupled up with fresh scream and applaud from the Slytherin. Looking down, Harry saw the punch-faced Percy Parkinson right at the front of the stadium. A packed pitch as she conducted the Slytherin supporter who were roaring, "That's why Slytherin," all singing Weasley is our king. But 20 nil was nothing. There was still time for Gryffindor to catch up or catch the snitch a few goals as they would be in the lead as usual. Harry assured himself, wobbling and waving through the other player in pursuit of something shiny that turned out to be Montague's strap. But Ron lit in two more goals. There was an edge of panic in Harry's desire to find Snitch now. If he could just get it soon and finish the game quickly, the Catty Bale of Gryffindor does Pussy, Duck Montague, Nace, Surrey, Catty, and she throw to Johnson. Angelina Johnson take the quaffle, she's past Warrington, she's heading for goals. Come on now, Angelina, Gryffindor score. It's 40-10, 40 to Slytherin, and Pansy has a quaffle. Harry could hear Luna's Ludrico lion had roaring amazed the Gryffindor cheer and felt hearted. Only 30 points, is it? That was nothing. He could pull back easily. Harry bucked a bludger that Grab had sent rocketing in his direction and resumed his frantic scoring of the pitch for the snitch, keeping one eye on Malfoy in case showing sign of having spotted it. But Malfoy, like him, was continuing to soar around the stadium, searching fruitlessly. Percy threw Warrington Warrington to Montague, Montague back to Pussy, Johnson intervened. Johnson take the coughle. Johnson to Bale. This look good. I mean bad. Bale hit by a bludger from Goyle and Slytherin and it's Pensy in position again. Weasley was born in Bean. He always let the coughle in. Weasley will make sure we win. But Harry has seen it at last. The tiny floating golden snitch was hovering feet from the ground at Slytherin end of the pitch. He dived in a manner to second Malfoy was steadying out of the sky on Harry's left, a green and silver blur lying flat on his broom. The snake skirted the foot on one of the goal, hooked and scooted off toward the other side of the stadium. It changed direction, suited Malfoy, who was nearer. Harry pulled his firebolt around. He and Malfoy were now cheek and neck, feet from the ground. Harry lifted his right hand from the broom, stretching toward the snake to his right, Malfoy's arm extended to, reaching, groping. It was over. Into breathless, desperate, wind-swept second, Harry's finger closed around a tiny struggling ball. Malfoy's fingernails scraped the back of Harry's hand hopelessly. Harry pulled his broom upward, holding a struggling ball in his hand, and the Gryffindor spectacles screamed their approval. They were saved. It did not matter that Ron had let this goal in. Nobody would remember as long as Gryffindor had won. Wham! A bludger hit Harry square in the small of the back and flew forward off his broom. Luckily, he was only 5 or 6 feet above the ground, having dived so low to catch the snitch, but he was widened all the same as he landed flat on his back on the frozen pitch. He heard Madame Who's shrill whistle, an uproar in the stand, compounded to Cascall, angry yell and jeering, a third, then Angelina, frantic voice. Are you all right? Course I am, said Harry grimly, taking her hand and allowing her to pull him to his feet. Madame Hooch was zooming toward on the Slytherin's player above him, though he could not see who it was at this angle. It was that thug, Grab, said Angelina angrily. He wanked the bludger at you the moment he saw you have got the snitch. But we won't. Harry, we won't. Harry heard a snort from behind him and turned around, still holding the snitch tightly in his hand. Draco Malfoy had landed closely by Whiteface with fury. He was still managing to sneer. Saved Weasley's neck, haven't you? He said to Harry. I have never seen a worse keeper, but then he was born in a dean. Did you like my lyrics, Potter? Harry did not answer. He turned away to meet the rest of the team who were not landing one by one, yelling and punching the air in triumph, all except Ron, who had dismounted from his broom over the goalpost and was making his way slow back to the changing room alone. He wanted to write another couple of verses, Malfoy called as Katie and Alicia hugged Harry, but we couldn't find rhyme for the fat and ugly. We wanted to sing about his mother. See, talk about sore grabs, said Angelina, casting Malfoy a disgust look. We couldn't find it useless loser either. For his father, you know, Fred and George had realized what Malfoy was talking about. Halfway through shaking Harry's hand, they sniffed, looking around the Malfoy. Leave it, said Angelina at once, taking Fred by the arm. Leave it, Fred. Let him yell. He's just scored. He lost. He jumped up little, but you like the Weasley. Don't you, Potter? Said Malfoy, sneering spent holiday there and everything, don't you? Can't see how you stand the stink. But I suppose when you have been dragged up by Muggle, even the Weasleys whole smell okay. Harry grabbed hold of George while it was picking the combined effort of Alicia and Katy to stop their leaping on Malfoy, who was laughing openly. Harry looked around for Madame Hooch, but she was still pretty grabbed for his illegal bludger attack. But perhaps, said Malfoy, as he laughed away. Harry was not aware of releasing George. All he knew was what a second later both of them were sprinting at Malfoy. He had completely forgotten the fact that all the teachers were watching. All he wanted to do was cause Malfoy as much pain as possible. With no time to drew out his wand, he merely drew back the first, clutching the sneeze and sacked it as hard as he could into Malfoy's stomach. Harry, Harry, George, no. He could hear girls' voices screaming, Malfoy yelling, George swearing, a whistle blowing, and the bowling of crowd around him. But he did not care, not until somebody in vicinity yelled, Impedimenta, and only when he was knocked over backward by the force and spell did he abandon the attempt to punch every inch of Malfoy he could reach. What do you think you are doing? Screamed Madame Hooch, and Harry leaped to his feet again. He was she who had hit him with impediment jinx. She was holding her whistle in one hand and a wand in the other. Her broom lay abandoned several feet away. Malfoy was curled upon on the ground, whimpering and moaning, his nose bloody. George was sporting a swollen lip. Fred was still being forcibly restrained by the three chasers, and Grab was cackling in the background. I have never seen behavior like it. Back up to the castle, both of you, and straight to your head of the house's office. Go now. Harry and George marched off the pitch, both panting, neither saying a word to each other. The howling and jeering of the crowd grew fainter and fainter until they reached the entrance hall, where they could hear nothing except the sound of their own footsteps. Harry became aware that something was still struggling in his right hand, the knuckle of which he had brushed against Malfoy's jaw. Looking down, he saw the snake's silver wing protruding from between his fingers, struggling to release, but had barely reached the door of Professor McGonagall's office when she came marching along the corridor behind them. She was wearing a Gryffindor scarf but tore it from her throat with shaking hand as she strode toward them, looking livid. In, she said furiously, pointing to the door. Harry and Georgie entered. She strode around him, her desk, and faced them, covering with a range of. She threw the Gryffindor scarf aside onto the floor. Well, she said, I thought never been such a disgraceful exhibition. 2 on 1. Explain yourself. Malfoy provoke us, said Harry sniffly. Provoke you, shouted Professor McGonagall, slamming her fist onto her desk so that her tattered biscuit tin slid sideways off it and burst open, littering the floor with George's nudes. He had just lost, hadn't he? Of course, he wanted to provoke you, but what on earth he can have said that justified what you did? He insulted my parents, sneered George and Harry's mother, but instead of leaving it to Madame Hooch to sort out, you two decided to give an exhibition of muggles dueling. Did you, beloved Professor McGonagall, have you any idea what you have? George and Harry both spun around. Lola Sumridge was standing in a doorway wrapped in a green twent cloak that greatly enhanced her resemblance to a giant toad and smiling in a horrible, sicky, ominous way that Harry had come to associate with imminent mystery. May I help Professor McGonagall? Asked Professor Umbridge in her most poisonously sweet voice. Blood rushed into Professor McGonagall's face. Help! She repeated in a constricted voice. What do you mean, help? Professor Umbridge moved forward into the office, still smiling her sticky smile. Why, I thought you might be grateful for a little extra authority. Harry would not have been surprised to see sparks fly from Professor McGonagall's nostrils. You thought wrong, she said, turning her back on Umbridge. Now you two had better listen closely. I do not care What provocation Malfoy offered you? I do not care if he insulted every family member you possess. Your behavior was disgusting, and I am giving each of you a week worth of detention. Do not look at me like that, Potter. You deserve it. And if either of you ever Professor McGonagall closed her eyes as though praying for practice. Patience as she turned her face toward Professor Umbridge again. Yes, I think they deserve rather more than detention, said Umbridge, smiling still more broadly. Professor McGonagall's eyes flew open, but unfortunately, she said with an attempt at a reciprocal smile that made her look as though she had lockjaw. It is what I think that count as they had in my house dollars. Well, actually, Minerva, simpered Umbridge, I think you'll find what I thinks does count. Now, there it is. Corneli just sent it. I mean, she gave a little false laugh as she rummaged in her handbag. The ministry just sent it. Oh, yes. She had pulled out a piece of parchment and she now unfolded, clearing her throat fussily before starting to read what it said. Educational degree number 25, not another one, explained Professor McGonagall violently. Well, yes, said Umbridge, still smiling. As a matter of fact, Minerva, it was you who made me see what we needed a further amendment. You remember how you overrode me when I was unwilling to allow the Gryffindor Quidditch team to reform. How you took the case of Dumbledore, who insisted that the team be allowed to play. Well, now I couldn't have that. I contacted the minister at once and he quite agreed with me that the High Inquisitor has to have power to strip purples and privilege, or she, that is to say, I would have less authority than common teacher, and you see now, don't you, Minerva? How might I, who was in attempting to stop the Gryffindor team reforming dreadful tempers anyway, I was reading out our amendments. The High Inquisitor will henceforth have supreme authority over all punishments, sanctions, and removal of privileges pertaining to the student of Hogwarts, and the power to allot such punishment, sanction, and removal of privilege as may have been ordered by other staff members. Signed Cornelius Fudge, Ministry of Magic, Order of Berlin, First Class, etc. She rolled out parchment and pulled it back into her handbag, still smiling. So I really think I will have to ban these two from playing Quidditch ever again, she said, looking from Harry to George and back again. Harry felt the snitch fluttering madly in his banners, he said, and his voice sounded straightly distant from playing ever again. Yes, Mr. Potter, I think a lifelong ban ought to do a trick, said Umbridge, her smile widening full further as she watched him struggling to comprehend what she had said. You and Mr. Weasley here, I think, to be safe, this young man Quinn ought to be stopped too. If his temperament had not restrained him, I feel sure he would have attacked young Mr. Malfoy as well. I will want their broomstick confiscated, of course. I shall keep them safely in my office to make sure there is no infringement of my ban, but I am not unreasonable, Professor McGonagall, she continued, turning back to Professor McGonagall, who was now standing as still as though carved from ice, staring at her. The rest of the team can continue playing. I saw no sign of violence from any of them. Well, good afternoon to you. Any with a look of the utmost satisfaction, Umbridge left the room, leaving a horrified silence in her wake. Band, said Angelina in hollow voice late that evening in the common room. Band, no seeker and no bitter. What on earth are we going to do? It did not feel as though they had won the match at all. Everywhere Harry looked, there were disconsolate and angry faces. The team themselves were slung around the fire, all apart from Ron. They had not been seen since the end of the match. It's just unfair, said Alicia numbly. I mean, what about Grab and that bludger he hit after the whistle had been bowled? As she banned him, no, said Ginny miserably. She and Hermione were sitting on either side of Harry. He just got lying. I heard Montague laughing about it at dinner and banning Fred when he didn't even do anything, said Alicia furiously pummeling her knee with her fist. It's not my fault I didn't, said Fred with a very ugly look on his face. I would have pounded the little scumbag to a pulp if you three hadn't been holding me back. Harry stared miserably at the dark window. Snow was falling. The snitch he had caught earlier was zooming around and around the common room. People were watching in progress as though hypnotized, and Crookshank was leaping from chair to chair, trying to catch it. I'm going to bed, said Angelina, getting slowly to her feet. Maybe this will all turn out to have a bad dream. Maybe I'll wake up tomorrow and find we haven't played yet. She was soon followed by Alicia and Katy. Fred and George slopped off to the bed some time later, growling at everyone they passed, and Ginny went not long after that. Only Harry and Hermione were left beside the fire. Have you seen Ron? Hermione asked in a low voice. Harry shook his head. I think he's avoiding us, said Hermione. Where do you think he? But at that precise moment there was cracking sound behind them as the fat lady swung forward and Ron came tumbling through the portrait hole. He was very pale indeed, and there was snow in his hair. When he saw Harry and Hermione, he stopped dead in his tracks. Where have you been? Said Hermione anxiously, springing up. Walking Ron mumbled. He was still wearing his quitch thing. You look frozen, said Hermione. Come and sit down. Ron walked to fireside and sank into the chair, farthest from Harry's, looking at him. His stolen sneeze zoomed and their head. I'm sorry, Ron mumbled, looking at his feet. What for? Said Harry. For thinking I can play quiz, said Ron. I'm going to resign first thing tomorrow. If you resign, said Harry testily, you'll be only three players left on the team, and Ron looked puzzled. He said I have been giving lifetime bans, so are Fred and George. What? Ron yelped. Hermione told him the very story. Harry could not bear tell it again. When she had finished, Ron looked more anguished than ever. This is all my fault. You don't make me punch Malfoy, said Harry angrily. If I wasn't so lousy at Quidditch. It's got nothing to do with that. It was that song that wound me up. It would have wound anyone up. Hermione got up and walked to the window, away from the argument, watching the snow swirling down again the pane. Look, Drolit, will you? Harry burst out. It's bad enough without you blaming yourself for everything. Ron said nothing but sat gazing miserable at the damn hem for his robe. After a while, he said in dull voice, this is the worst I have ever felt in my life. Join the club, said Harry bitterly. Well, said Hermione, her voice trembling silently. I can think if one thing that might cheer you up both. Oh yes, said Harry skeptically. Yes, said Hermione, turning away from the pitch black snowflakes window, a broad smile spreading across her face. Hagrid's back. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next chapter. Till then, see ya. Bye bye.